Hey guys, it's Austin with 505OMATIC. We are live at Deb Haaland's campaign headquarters in Albuquerque. Deb, thanks so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Happy to be here. Or happy to have you here, actually. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. So I'll just jump right in to my first question. We, just to give you and our audience some background on what we've been doing, we also asked your primary opponent, Bernalillo County District Attorney Sam Bregman, for an interview. He accepted, but then canceled, citing scheduling conflicts, and hasn't rescheduled with us. He's also been vocal about having a debate with you, which will be airing tonight. What makes you different as a candidate from Mr. Bregman?
So what makes me different from Mr. Bregman and every candidate on the ballot this year for governor is that I'm the only candidate who has executive experience in the manner that I have it. I've managed a department with 70,000 career staff, an $18 billion annual budget. I was a member of Congress, so I not only passed laws, passed bills and had them signed into law, I also implemented them as Secretary of the Interior. So I know how to get work done. I've been organizing here in New Mexico for the past couple of decades, getting voters registered, getting people to the polls. And so I feel like my organizing work also is something that is different from Mr. Bregman and all of the other governor candidates also.
So, a lot of folks in New Mexico might be familiar with, your past with Biden as Interior Secretary, and you were a Congresswoman before that. Can you talk more a little bit about that organizing, maybe even before you got to Congress? Is there anything that you would share with people from that time?
So yes, and it's interesting because I run into a lot of people who organized alongside me, but I worked on both Obama campaigns. I was a volunteer for 08, a full-time volunteer for 08, and a paid staffer for 12. I helped a lot of other candidates, running for state house and so forth to get into office. And I went to underrepresented communities. You might know that Native Americans couldn't vote in New Mexico until 1948. And so for me, I felt like we were behind and we needed to catch up. So I really spent a lot of time in all the Pueblos, the Navajo Nation chapters, the Apache Nation, registering voters and then driving back and getting those folks to the polls. But I felt like, organizing, I really felt like I was doing something valuable because we always need voter turnout. And I'll just say, too, that working in Indian country, you have to be kind of creative. Back when I started organizing, there weren't even street names or house numbers. So you were very creative about how you, engaged people. Knocking on doors and making your own maps and the whole 9 yards. But I thought we did a really good job, me and lots of volunteers, going to the Gallup flea market every Saturday, setting up a table, registering voters, all the Pueblo feast days. I did that for a long time just because I wanted more people to vote.
A couple of years ago, I actually interviewed a Navajo man who lives in Albuquerque who was wrongfully denied registering to vote because of a false felony conviction on his record. And it really got me thinking about how the right to vote is so fragile, and even today, right? And I think we just saw a U.S. Supreme Court decision that negatively affected the Voting Rights Act. Maybe you can tell us more about that. What are you going to do as governor to protect the right to vote for Native people, for all marginalized folks in New Mexico?
Well, I think we're very fortunate here in New Mexico that we have laws that protect voters. We have a Secretary of State and the amazing staff in that office that have really worked to remove obstacles for people to vote. Back when I started organizing, there were some pueblos with no early voting sites, and we advocated for things like that. And New Mexico came through for us, right? We we tried to help make sure that those obstacles are removed, and New Mexico's always been a place where, and maybe we fought for this a little bit, but I think in the last 10 years, we've really worked hard to, pass the Native American Voting Rights Act, all kinds of early voting sites. Now we can same day register and vote, and you can vote by mail. There's so many ways you can vote, and so I feel like New Mexico, we need to remain, this island in the sea of, whatever the Republicans are doing. They think that, by stopping people from voting that they'll win. And I just think that's very wrong-headed. And look, it's very sad that we have a Supreme Court now that just goes along with what Donald Trump wants.
I want to move now to a more local and sort of statewide issue. So we have a state public regulation commission that is overseeing a proposed buyout of our largest electric utility company in the state that people know as PNM. I want to put it to you directly. I mean, do you oppose that sale or not?
So, look, I'm keeping an eye on it. I saw that the Attorney General filed a lot. He said the way this transaction went through was incorrect. I don't think that's starting out on the right foot, right? We should, if we're doing something this large and it's affecting hundreds of thousands of New Mexicans, they need to get it right. And so I know that there have been lots and lots of protests, and I want everyone to speak out on this issue. And I also want to say that private equity doesn't have a good track record here in New Mexico, right? Terrible with healthcare. Stopping people from getting the health care they need, putting parameters on doctors, bringing Wall Street into the exam room. I don't want that to happen. The PRC now, of course, it's appointed with professionals. It used to be elected, so anybody could run and win. Now there are professionals who study issues, who that's their calling, and so I want to make sure that they're getting every single bit of information that they need to assess this project, and that if I'm the next governor of New Mexico, their feet need to be held to the fire if this deal goes through. I'm waiting to see, quite frankly, how things are starting to turn out, but private equity doesn't have a good track record. We need some guardrails for any private equity that wants to come into New Mexico, and so yes, I want to assess that as it moves along.
And if you do take office as governor and you're elected, I mean, would you? Those public regulation commission seats that we're talking about are appointed by the governor, as you said. I mean, would you appoint members of that commission who would oppose private equity buyouts of other public utilities?
Look, we need qualified people in those positions. We need people in those positions who put the communities of New Mexico first, right? We want people who not only are professionals and have the training and experience, but also people who care about the communities that they're serving. I'm not the type of person who will just, put folks in there because they're doing what I want them to do. That's not what the call of the question is. So I think that we need to just make sure we're doing things in the right way, above board, in a transparent manner, so that New Mexicans have confidence about how these things are being done.
And then I want to kind of zoom out because, so much of that discussion about our biggest electric utility and who controls it has a lot to do with our future and facing climate change.
Yes.
What would you do as governor to counter climate change? And if you do get elected, what does a transition away from fossil fuel extraction look like under your administration?
So first of all, when I was Secretary of the Interior, proud to protect millions of acres of land. Our nature is our best ally in our fight against climate change. And so, people talk about carbon capture and all these things. Ensuring that our ecosystems are cared for, that we are conserving land and letting nature do its work. That is the best remedy for ensuring that we are fighting climate change. But also, we can do other things. When I was Secretary, we moved a clean energy transition forward for our entire country. 12 offshore wind sites. There was no offshore wind anywhere in the country before. There might have been a few, but we really jump-started it. 12 offshore wind projects, 50 solar projects across the Southwest. We need to continue to do that. We need to make sure that we are using our natural resources like wind, solar, geothermal here that we have here in New Mexico to power our state. And any industry that wants to come to New Mexico, they need to go along with the goals that we have set for ourselves, right? No gas-fired microgrids. They need to move forward with what we have decided that we want for our state, and that is to move to 100, zero emissions by 2050. And that's what we need to concentrate on and focus on. And that's what I'll do as governor. And so those, I think, are ways to move our, to fight climate change, but ensuring that that we are bringing sustainable industry here. Yes, we need jobs, but we also need water to live. Yes, we need jobs. We also need to ensure that our children are breathing clean air. And so, and then one last thing, when I was Secretary, millions of dollars to fight legacy pollution, to plug orphan oil and gas wells. The extractive industries have made a mess here, and that legacy pollution needs to be cleaned up.
I'm glad that you mentioned microgrids. There is this very prominent proposal and development in the Las Cruces area known as Project Jupiter. This is a large data center. And they've proposed, are they going to use our local electricity, or are they proposing their own microgrid? And what would be, as part of this transition that you're talking about, what would be an acceptable way for them to actually power such a large data center? And would that microgrid, you're saying no gas fired. So what is a sustainable way of powering that look like?
So I read an article recently that they changed their method to fuel cells. And if you look, I'm not the power or energy expert. I love clean energy because we know we can power it with resources that we have that don't pollute. Fuel cells, they are said to be a green source of energy. I think that is, the jury's still out on that, and people are looking at their proposal right now. And then I've said, why can't we use solar energy? You think a great big building like that should just have solar panels all over the top? And yet they say it's not enough to power these machines. The fuel cells, they say, will be quieter and they will use less water. So I just feel like we need to decide for ourselves what the guardrails will be for this type of industry to come into New Mexico, because they don't have a good track record all over the rest of the country. And so guardrails for sure. We should have parameters of what will be acceptable for New Mexico. We live in a high desert. We're in the midst of a climate crisis. We don't have water to spare. And so these are all things that I believe very strongly. We should decide for ourselves and stick to it, and decide in a transparent manner. New Mexicans deserve to know what is happening here, and they should know.
So next, there's been some really great local journalism recently Source New Mexico and the Texas Tribune worked together and found that the desert west of Las Cruces has recently become the deadliest section of border for migrants. And neither Trump nor elected officials from Texas or our own state here in New Mexico have addressed the issue, even as the number of deaths has really skyrocketed. As governor, would you direct the Department of Public Safety and the New Mexico State Police to recover those remains and to try to reconnect them with their loved ones?
So I think it's shameful if we're not addressing this issue in a humane manner. These are people. They deserve to be. If they die in the desert, well, for God's sake, yes, we should treat them humanely. These are people's family and relatives, and so I'm not sure exactly what what a proposal like that looks like. However, it's appalling that we have an administration with all the chaos coming out of the White House treating people so inhumanely. It's just absolutely shameful. And we shouldn't, and I dealt with this when I was in Congress, right? Donald Trump separating families, treating people in the worst possible way. And this is just unacceptable. We're better than that. And I know that here in New Mexico, we have so many communities who care about people. And so we should absolutely make sure we're doing the right thing, the humane thing, and treating people with respect.
I want to do one more question on public safety. It was recently found that New Mexico, unfortunately, is once again the #1 state with the highest number of police shootings, as in deadly police shootings, of any state in the country. If you're elected as governor, what would you do to counter that?
So when I was Secretary of the Interior, when I came into office, there had been a terrible shooting on National Park Service land that everybody was outraged about. It was terrible. People were afraid. The family of the person who was killed was not getting the answers they deserved. And so I implemented a law enforcement task force to make sure that we were operating in a transparent. When I was Secretary of the Interior, I think I was in charge of or responsible for 5 or 6 law enforcement agencies across the department. This was the U.S. Park Police. And so we implemented the law enforcement task force. It above all gave guidelines for transparency. We made sure that the police officers had, lapel cameras and all of the things that help them to operate in a transparent manner. And I think operating in a transparent manner, it's good for the community and it's good for people to know and understand. And we absolutely need that. Whatever technology law enforcement needs to ensure that they're operating transparently, I think that in and of itself is helpful, for the community to know that they're doing what they say they're supposed to do. We need more training. Whatever we need to do, that's what we should do. But training, guidelines, technology, these are all things that I think we can implement into our law enforcement agencies so that they are more transparent, so that they are, acting in the best possible way and using force as a very, very last resort.
I'm interested in that answer. We're in Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. The police department here is one of the deadliest in the country. Mm-hmm. The city was under federal consent decree for many years. They were required to go through all of this reform, transparency, training. I've made the argument in writing before. They're one of the most reformed police departments in the country, and yet they're still killing people at the highest rate in the country. Would you ever consider taking some of that state funding for policing away and putting it into healthcare, social services, education, and other things that will actually prevent that crime on the front end?
So I'm glad you asked that question, because part of my public safety plan is getting to the root causes of crime. And we know juvenile crime that's an issue that a lot of people talk about. If we have juveniles on our streets committing crimes, then the adults in the room have failed that child. We should have been doing more to ensure that child was getting the education they deserve, getting the health care that they deserve, getting the behavioral health care they deserve. One of the things I want to do is start an Office of Community Safety. Right now, police should not be going to calls for behavioral health issues. It's not a crime to be unhoused on the streets of Albuquerque. It's not a crime to be camped out on a corner because you don't have anywhere to go. But yet police will be called to issues that happen in these places. It takes them away from, getting violent criminals off our streets and the drug traffickers off our streets. We need professional behavioral health professionals, social workers, people who can go on a call like that and help that person get the help they need. Do they need a doctor? Do they need a therapist? Do they need a shelter for the night? How else can we help this person to get the help they need than being arrested, taken to jail, or, of course, violently shot?
Next, I want to move to, some of the things that our current governor has done, where you might continue, where you might diverge. So Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham's universal child care policy it made national news when she announced it. But it's recently been challenged in court by a Republican candidate for governor. If elected, what would you do to actually strengthen our state's universal child care system?
Of course. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that if I would have had child care when I was raising my kid as a single mom, it would have changed my life. I opened a small business because I had to find a way to earn some money, and I couldn't afford child care. So the funding stream is obviously one of the most important things, right? Making sure that we have recurring funding for that program. But we also need more child care workers. So are we strengthening the Opportunity Scholarship? Are we enhancing funding so that people can get their child care certificate, go to school to become a child care worker, even later in their careers? Funding for small businesses small businesses to open child care centers. More money in our site readiness fund so that we can get some of these places ready for folks to open these centers and staff them with people who are qualified. And this needs to happen across the state, not just in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and Las Cruces, but in our rural communities also. So I want to make sure that we are strengthening it and that it's there for people into the future. This is something that is good for our economy on top of everything.
As governor, you're going to be working closely with the legislative branch of New Mexico. It seems like there's a lot of appetite, from my point of view, in the legislature to use these sovereign wealth funds to do good social policy to help people. What are some of the things that you think we could be putting a lot more money into, using those large funds that we have saved up over the years?
Sure. Well, a public option for health care, for one. I think every single New Mexican should have health care and not have to worry about it and not have to break their bank to afford it every month. And so I think that's a big one, right? Making sure that people can see a doctor when they're sick. I mean, some of the other ideas, and look, healthcare is directly related to affordability, right? I want to enhance the child tax credit and the working families tax credit. I think people should have more money in their pockets at the end of the month. But I believe very strongly that healthcare is one of the biggest issues. People need to be healthier. If they have access to healthy food, if they have access to a doctor before they get terribly ill, our healthcare costs go down. So in a way, investments into our communities like that, into our people like that, in the end, I think will be it will save us so much money in the long run.
I remember it was about a month ago, Jerome and I were at an event in Santa Fe called Drinking Liberally, and I remember that you talked about this public option for healthcare. And I wanted to ask you a follow-up to what you said, is that, like, what would that option look like? And would you be expanding our existing Medicaid program to cover everyone? Or would you be creating an entirely public option? Or would you be working with the private insurance companies to get everyone health care?
So Medicaid is something that I fear that we won't be able to rely on, right? It's Donald Trump and the cuts to Medicaid could close 5 rural hospitals across our state. If hospitals close, then people are out of luck and have to drive hundreds of miles. So I'm feeling like, and we're still like looking at this in the best way possible, but it's a true public option, right? And I think if we had a true public option where it was state-sponsored, nobody could be denied. It would help small businesses to provide health care to their workers, right? I'm also advocating for a raise to the minimum wage, and I know that small businesses fear for that because they worry about the longevity of their businesses. But if we can help them with benefits to their workers as a state program, then it builds the small businesses up, it builds our economy up. These are all things that will build our economy. If we have a healthier population, they're going to be working more. They're not taking sick days. I just feel like this is one of the keys to how we move our state forward.
And then, again, looking at our current governor, I mean, is there anything that if elected, like, do you anticipate doing anything differently from Governor Lujan Grisham? And, what opportunities are there for you to do things maybe that she couldn't over the last 8 years?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, of course, so grateful for our governor for universal child care, getting the early childhood across the finish line. That's something that many people advocated for a very long time, and now we have it. That would have helped me also when I was raising my child. We're in a different era, though, right? We're in the second Trump era. Governor Lujan Grisham had the horrible pandemic to deal with. Nearly, shortly after she got into office. And so, hoping that we don't have a devastating thing like that. I feel like healthcare is the big issue in New Mexico, and we need to figure it out. We have a broken healthcare system. That needs to be figured out. And we also need our kids to have opportunities, and we can do that by ensuring that they can read sooner. I am committed to making sure that our students have the best head start possible. If they can read before 3rd grade, their whole educational journey opens up for them, and I just believe that we'll be in a much better place. If you can read, you can do math. Right? And our math and reading scores are very low here in New Mexico. So I want to get those up. I want our kids to have opportunities. I want to bring the trades back to the schools so that students in junior high can look at a career path and then have hands-on training when they get to high school. Not every kid wants a 4-year college degree, so we need we need opportunities for every single student in New Mexico. So I think those are some of the things that I would make my priority: healthcare, affordability, education. I mean, it's all important, right? So we'll just have to work super hard and make sure we get as much done as possible.
Deb Haaland, thank you so much for sitting down with me. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
Appreciate it, guys.
You bet. Thank you.
I was trying to tell you could probably do one more question.
If you want.
You got one more? Want to take one from the audience?
Yeah, we want to take an audience question.
There were
We
two.
might have an audience question.
One that came in. One of these that came in from Antifa since Vietnam. Would you sponsor legislation to increase the amount of mental health workers on cities or state payroll?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yes, we need that. We need them for my Office of Community Safety. Yes.
And one more from the same person. How can you help protect our public lands?
I will do what I did when I was Secretary of the Interior. And one of the things I want to make sure is that our Attorney General can hire more lawyers so we can fight the federal government in every effort they're trying to make to shrink our public lands, and I really am dedicated to that. You know, under the Biden administration, we protected like 41 million acres of public lands. Nature's our best ally in our fight against climate change. 30 by 30% of our land and waters by 2030 is what scientists said we needed to protect to, hold us back from the precipice of climate change. And so I still hold that in my heart. And we need to conserve land. We need to make sure that we are inspiring our next generation of land stewards. And that's why I want an Every Child Outdoors initiative. And that's what we'll do.
Well, thank you again, Deb Haaland, and thanks to our viewers for posing such great questions too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.